I've survived over 6,000 days in hardcore Minecraft. The difference is I haven't used a single totem. My current project that I'm working on is to make the most impressive creeper farm in a single player world. So far, I've dug out a hole with a 259 diameter down to bedrock without using any TNT duping. Previously, I've built some massive farms around the world, such as the gold farm, the guardian farm, and other smaller projects. If you want to check those out, make sure you check out the whole series linked in the description down below. Let's get straight into the project. Starting out on day 5001, I continued on with decorating around the creeper farm. I had a couple of layers already decorated from last episode, so now the plan was to continue this pattern all the way to the edge of the circle. I first marked out the next level, building a circle of cyan terracotta all the way around. I then grabbed some grass blocks and filled in the space between the circle. This was to give a multiple layer effect, like a staircase going towards the center. I ended up running out of grass blocks, so I headed to spawn chunks to collect some more. After a few days of collecting, I could then continue building up the decoration. I finished off the layer of grass, then I started working on the wall design. This was in the same style as the levels I had previously completed, so it was pretty easy to wing it and build up the walls pretty quickly. I started out by putting all the supports in first, then marked out the sea lantern pattern and the back blocks of the wall. I had to space out the lighting so there's a high enough light level so no mobs will spawn on the grass. There's still a risk of slime spawning, so I'll have to work out a plan for that later on. Once everything was marked out, I then built up the walls with concrete powder. This was to save time because I could just pour water afterwards to make this into concrete rather than wasting time changing it and then placing it again. It wasn't long until I had also run out of these materials, so I went on a resource collection mission. First, I had to fill up a bunch of shulker boxes of sand, and I already had the gravel needed to combine to make concrete powder. After collecting sand, I took a quick detour to get some sea lanterns from the guardian farm, since I'll need more of these in the future as well. I had to wait for all the drops, so I actually did some organizing for once. There was a bunch of messy shulker boxes, so I just went through and put the items into the correct boxes. Once it was sorted, I had enough sea lanterns to send me on my way. The journey to the guardian farm is roughly 20,000 blocks in the overworld, and I want to be able to travel back as fast as possible. So far, I've been using nether travel, where 8 blocks in the overworld equals 1 in the nether, essentially 8 times as fast. However, this isn't fast enough. I want to find the nearest stronghold where I jump straight through, and it will take me back to the main area of the world if I haven't set my spawn in my bed. This will mean I can instantly travel back instead. The only problem is I don't have any eyes of ender, so I went and grabbed some blaze rods from the nether, and I already had some ender pearls, so I combined the two to make eyes of ender, and then started looking for the nearest end portal. The first eyes led me to a broken stronghold where it didn't generate. I had to travel 1,000 blocks to a new area where it hadn't been loaded, and I instantly found another stronghold. This time it generated in, so I cleaned up the portal area and put the eyes in place to light the portal. Since this was further away than the original stronghold I thought I now had to connect a nether portal to get here from the guardian farm quicker. I dug a quick tunnel through the netherrack and made it somewhat safe. I then headed through the end portal and took a second to check on how many drops the creeper farm had done. As you can see, these chests were completely filled, so it was working extremely well. After that little side quest, I made the final bits of white concrete and got straight back into building up the decoration. The next thing I placed in front was purple glass and then quartz slabs in front of that, and by day 5038 I was out of quartz, so I headed towards the gold farm to get some more. How you get quartz from this is by gathering and crafting all the gold into ingots, and then feeding these ingots to the piglins. While I was waiting on the gold to be traded, I used the time wisely to heal up my tools by getting some XP. Once these were healed, I then crafted all the quartz back into blocks, and on the way back to building, I grabbed some more logs to make more shulker boxes, since the gunpowder drops were filling up too fast. I'm hoping that the quartz I collected can at least finish off this layer of decoration. Yep, it's definitely enough. The third layer leading all the way to the edge of the circle was nearly complete. I just needed to fill in the grass again. Almost there, just ran out of a couple stacks of grass, and there we go, another layer completed. Then I spent all the days up to day 5071 building the exact same design on the next layer up, until I ran out of quartz again. Since quartz is so expensive and I needed so much of it, this time I realized I had some leftover from a long time ago when I was digging out the gold farm perimeter. If you missed that video, you can check that out from the Hardcore Season 5 playlist. But a quick reminder, during the digging I had a Silk Touch enchantment on my pickaxe which allowed me to pick up all the blocks in block form, so now I just have shulker boxes full of them. And to get the most amount of quartz, I can now use the Fortune 3 enchantment, so that there's a chance of more drops dropping from each block. So I spent the next couple of days just placing the quartz ore and mining them with Fortune. And now I should hopefully have enough to get to the top of the circle. I finished off the 4th layer, and as I was marking out the 5th, I realized the beacons are in the way. Since the beacons can't work if there's a full block like grass in the way, and I don't want a gap in the flooring, I moved all the beacons to a new location in the middle of the grass layer, so I could hide glass with moss carpets above. This would mean that the beacon light would still be able to shine through and give me the beacon effects. Then filled in the gaps left until I ran out of grass. During this project, the snow had been annoying me the whole time, because one section of the build was in a snowy peaks biome, so that was the only part that would get snowed on. To fix this, I had an idea to hide string high up in the sky, which I thought would block the snow particles from landing. Yeah, I was wrong about this one. If you guys have any suggestions on how to stop the snow on this part of the build, please let me know in the comments down below. After this, I just collected some more grass and then filled in the remaining pieces of the 5th layer. I started on the next level until I realized I was going to have to move more of the beacons to the correct positions. So I marked out all of the holes where the beacon lights were going to fit and then moved the beacon bases accordingly. Then I used up the rest of the terracotta on the top section, but needed to collect some more to get the final layer done at the top of the circle. Once I had enough terracotta, I combined the blue and green dye to make cyan and continued on with the building. Again, just using the same pattern which took me up all the way to day 5118. I ran out of glass, so quickly traded some of the villagers, then built the remaining materials and didn't have quite enough quartz, so I had to take a stop off at the gold farm and bartered for some more. While I was waiting, I spent some time fixing the decoration at the gold farm, just making small changes to the detail. I also have this empty room which has been there for the longest time. For this room, I wanted to trap a ghast and some other mobs just to fill up the space. My plan was to make a railway that led into the room and get a ghast into the minecart, and then all I would need to do is push the ghast down the rails and then somehow break the minecart. The first step was to build a temporary box out of netherrack where the ghast could spawn in. All I had to do was wait, and it wasn't long until I had a ghast spawn. It was trapped in a minecart so it couldn't fly away, but I had to redirect the rails as I didn't want it to suffocate and die inside of the netherrack blocks. And well, yeah, that didn't go to plan. Now I needed to wait again for another to spawn in. In the meantime, I just crafted up some more gold to trade with the piglins, then grabbed some netherrack and expanded the size of the box to hopefully speed up the spawning. I got lucky and the ghast spawned in right away, and all I have to do is transport them safely. All I had to do now was break the minecart underneath somehow. The only way to get the minecart and destroy it without killing the ghast was by using a piston to push the activator rails where the minecart is, and then by powering the activator rails, it would bump the ghast out of the minecart. And after a massive sidetrack, I finally had the ghast trapped in the room. Now all I needed to do was tidy up the mess I made by removing the rails and the netherite box. I also had a rare Halloween mob saved from a while ago, which I put next to the ghast. And to fill the final space, I moved the strider who's been roaming around the perimeter for a while. I gave him a nice warm lava bath, so now he's chilling. After all the time spent in this area, I now had more than enough quartz, so time to get building the final ring of the creeper farm. And again, I ran out of some of the terracotta, so I grabbed that quickly. Then marked out the rest of the circle to the edge, filled in the grass, ran out of grass, filled in the last section, and now this should be the top section pretty much done all the way to the edge of the circle. The next step was putting some lighting down below as I pretty much blocked out all the sunlight. I just put some sea lanterns scattered throughout the bedrock. Then went to the guardian farm to craft a bunch since I'll need to scatter them around the entire floor of the creeper farm. I spent a couple of days placing these down until I ran out again and had to head back over to craft some more. After placing pretty much all the lighting in, I changed the blocks underneath the creeper farm in the middle since I had just left them as messy blocks, and then quickly tidied up some of the shulker boxes left around the farm. My next plan was to hide all of the beacons around the farm because right now it looked ugly just having these iron blocks sat around. So I decided to design some pillars which would also look like it's holding up the decoration above. This took a while to come up with a design and build it all the way up, but I was happy with this, and now I could just use the same design around the rest of the beacons. Before I started building up all the pillars, I made sure to put slabs on the beacons to spawn proof them. Spawn proofing just means that no monsters can spawn here and affect the rates of the farm. I then built up a taller version of the first pillar I created to hide the next beacon. I then spent a few days trying to connect the two pillars and hide the blocks above. From down below, it didn't look great just seeing the bottom of these grass blocks. I ran out of dark prismarine pretty quickly, so I went and crafted some more at the guardian farm. While I was waiting for more drops, I went underneath this farm and started lighting up the caves. In theory, the more caves I light up means the less monsters could spawn in these caves, so I should be getting a lot more drops faster. However, it won't be perfect unless I dig out all of the blocks, since there'll always be some caves I miss. And a lot of the monsters will then spawn in these missed caves, but I think I've had enough of digging. At least for now, so I just spent a few days spamming some torches around. I then headed back to the surface and crafted up a couple more stacks of dark prismarine, and continued on with trying to come up with a design to hide the blocks of the creeper farm. After trying this design for a while, I wasn't happy with how it turned out, so I just tore it back down. I think when building, it's fine to try some stuff out, and if it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. You can just rebuild it, and sometimes you have to build it first anyway to see where the mistakes are. I then spent the next couple of days just getting rid of the blocks, and I already had a new plan in mind. I outlined the blocks already there, and then filled the gaps with dark prismarine slabs to cover the dirt. This was to keep the shape of the top part, and it all started fitting together well. To get around and place all the blocks easily, I used netherrack as temporary blocks, so I grabbed a few shulker boxes since I could instantly mine the blocks and get rid of them afterwards. I continued filling the same pattern all the way to the top of one quarter of the circle, just so I could get a look to see if it actually worked or not, and it actually looked amazing once it's all in place. So all I had to do now was replicate this on all four sides. Before doing that though, I had to fix the pillar because I wanted this to connect as if it was holding up the blocks above. With that done, I also needed to work out how the pillar in the corner would hide this beacon. I got to work copying the previous pillar and tweaking it to make sure it fit in place, and after about 10 Minecraft days of building, the next pillar was complete. The copying part of the build was taking quite a while because I kept flying back to check on the previous pillar to see what comes next. So I had a plan to build all the rest of them at the exact same time. I started by making sure all the beacons were in the correct place and spawn proofing them with deep safe slabs. Then I went around and built up the bottom area of each pillar so that each one had the same measurements. After this, I spent many days filling up all the middle sections of each tower, again just leaving a gap at the top to do afterwards. And once that was done, I then started working on filling in each top section, connecting it to the ceiling. I took a break to grab some rockets, so the creeper farm is already coming in handy with the gunpowder. But this basic sugarcane farm could do with a little upgrade later on. Oh, and of course I had to heal the wings along the way. If those break, I'm dead for sure. Finally, I finished off the last pillar and now all of them were perfect. It looked like the whole build was being supported by them. Now, remember when I did that 1/4 of decoration earlier? I now have to fill in the other sections all the way around. The first thing I needed was more prismarine slabs, so I grabbed some from the Guardian farm and got back to work on filling in the sections of the ceiling. I did this for many days, slowly working my way up to the top and doing 1/4 of the build at a time. But I'd run out of materials, so I went to gather glass and more prismarine blocks. While waiting for the Guardian drops so I could get more blocks, I started to mark out and sort of plan a future project. Since this farm doesn't look very tidy, I'll eventually have this looking pretty, but that'll be a long time in the future. Since I never AFK in the world, I always try and do something productive that will help in the future, rather than just standing around. After getting a bit carried away, I then had more than enough blocks and spent a while crafting them up. On the way back, I grabbed some more rockets and got back to filling in the top section. I spent all the way up to day 5,346 doing the same task, so we'll do some editing magic and we can skip forwards a bit. Now with all the pillars complete and the ceiling blending in as well, it was starting to come together. All I could focus on though was the ugly walls around the edge, but don't worry, I planned for this and already mined an extra block when doing the perimeter. The only thing I hadn't planned though was a wall design, so I got to work putting down random blocks to find a pattern that I liked. Initially, I liked the deep safe middle section with the random blocks to give it texture, but the outline didn't look good, so I went and swapped this out with blackstone instead, and the color scheme didn't look quite right either. Eventually, I tried spruce logs and these fit perfectly. Although this is going to be a very expensive material to get, I think it'll be worth it. The next thing to do was to get to work. Starting out, I placed all the logs I had on me to make an outline and then put the lighting in each of the sections. Since these are powered redstone lamps, I had to hide a redstone torch to power each one behind the wall. Again, this is a very expensive material to get, but definitely worth it. I kept filling up all of these sections with blocks and even had some sections where I left the caves and put a window instead. Once I had done pretty much 1/4 of the wall, I took a step back to admire and I knew this pattern was going to work for the entire wall. The only two problems now was that I needed all of these expensive materials and then I had to spend the time building it all up. For the glowstone and redstone, it wasn't too bad, I just had to trade with the villagers. But for the logs, I didn't really have a great way of getting them. I was just manually growing them using bone meal and then spending ages chopping them down. After realizing that I would need thousands of trees, I decided it was finally time to make a tree farm. I decided to go with Ilmango's design and I would just hook it up to the blast chamber I built before. Essentially how it works is as soon as the tree grows, it then gets pushed into the blast chamber part. And this is where the TNT is dispensed down and then blows up, destroying the tree logs, where I can then go and pick up all the items without having to spend ages mining them. The first step was gathering some materials needed for the build. Then the next couple of days just spent piecing together the redstone, making sure that every bit was working together and checking that each part made sense. Once the tree farm was complete, I then hooked it up to the main control panel. And after doing some final checks and adding some finishing touches, it was time to test out planting a tree. At first it seemed like it had worked, but it very quickly became apparent that something had gone wrong. There was an issue with the timing somewhere within the redstone, so I spent the next few days redoing some parts and making sure everything was in the correct place. On the second try of planting the trees, the first part worked perfectly. However, when I got to the blast chamber part of the build, something went completely wrong. A lot of the parts got broken, and the only reason this happened is because an enderman went and picked up one of the sand blocks that makes the machine work and moved it to a different part of the machine. I can't even make this up. The next few days, I just spent cleaning out the machine where it had been broken and swapped out the sand blocks for concrete powder, as endermen aren't able to move these blocks. Then it was time to test again, and it broke again. Nice. After some back and forth with some testing and fixing the problems with the machine, finally by day 5,453, the tree farm was working perfectly. So I planted trees for a bit and then I checked on the drops and I already had a huge amount. I could have stopped at this point, but another machine that I've always wanted to attach to this blast chamber is a cobblestone generator that can also switch between basalts. This would just be something nice to have in the future if I needed these blocks for redstone components or decoration. This farm is again designed by Ilmango and pretty easy to set up. After planting some more trees, I had more than enough logs to head back across to the creeper farm to keep on building. I laid out more of the wall design, trying to complete it all the way around, and spent the next few days doing this until I ran out of logs again. Before heading back to the tree farm, I used the wither skeleton farm to make bone meal from their bones, which was then used to grow the trees. I then spent almost 10 Minecraft days just farming trees, and afterwards I had hopefully more than enough to complete the building. After a few more days of building the outline of the wall, I found out it was thankfully enough blocks, and the next step was going to be filling in all of these walls with decoration. I got a mixture of deep slate blocks and spammed them down randomly into the walls. I did this all the way around the circle, and by day 5508 it was time to grab some redstone lamps for the lighting. And I scattered these in gaps around the walls so I could get rid of all the shadows. Like I said earlier, these were expensive to make, so I quickly got some redstone ore that I had saved from the mining and used the fortune enchantment for my pickaxe to get more drops. Next, I made some more lamps using glowstone that I had saved from the villager trading earlier, and then got back to placing them all in the walls. This didn't last long, but after some quick trading for redstone and glowstone, I should now have more than enough to finish off all the lighting. And just like that, the whole of the wall now had no more shadows. To finish off the wall, I needed to fill in the last sections with deep slate stairs in random patterns, just like I did before when I was doing the first quarter of the design. I spent a few days doing this, and now all I had left was the finishing touches. This was things like adding deep slate walls and covering any wood trunks. I spent many days on this, and with the glass wall being filled in, the walls were now complete. You might be wondering why there's 3 gaps in the remaining sides of the walls, and I have a plan to fill in each of these. The first section I need to start clearing out will be the sugarcane and bamboo farm. Since I have so much gunpowder, the only other ingredient to make rockets is sugarcane, and the bamboo farm will come in handy to make scaffolding. I made a start in the section and marked out the dimensions, then went and collected sand so I could use the TNT to help speed up the clearing process. I blasted through the section and then spent a few days clearing the rest of the blocks with my pickaxe. Once I had enough space, I laid out the floor plan of how the bamboo farm would look and also tried to make sure it would be efficient with collecting all of the drops. I then collected some bamboo with the early game farm where it just bone meals the bamboo to grow it and then breaks it with a piston to get more. And when I had a few stacks just to start off the new farm, I started the building phase. The design for this was going to be similar to the cactus farm I built previously, which used strip logs as the outline and then white concrete blocks in between. I just feel like it has a really clean look to it, so I had some materials to collect. I got some sand for the concrete, bones to make white dye, a little bit of glass from trading with the villagers, then made the concrete powder into concrete by pushing it through the water. And now hopefully I should have enough blocks to build up this section. I also added a dark prismarine trim to the top section to tie the decoration together. Now it's time to add the functionality. I placed in the rails underneath the dirt so that the minecarts could travel across and pick up the bamboo from above once they'd been harvested. After the rails were all in place, I then filled in the dirt above and started to mark out where the lighting would be since the bamboo needed a certain light level to grow. My plan for the lighting was end rods as they fit the palette quite well. So I headed out to the end and started to collect some chorus fruit to then combine with blaze rods to make end rods. Next, I got all the lighting in place and then filled in the remaining spots on the ground fully with bamboo. I threw together a basic fly machine which would go from one side of the area and back again, breaking any bamboo in its way, and then the minecarts would come underneath and pick up all of the drop bamboo. I then spent the next few days connecting all the redstone and trying out different ideas to make this run as smoothly as possible, and by day 5616 I tested it and it harvested perfectly, picking up all the blocks in the minecarts and then depositing the drops into the chest. I also finished off the roof of the bamboo area because I wanted to be able to walk across the top and see the machine working below. I cleared out the area above afterwards so it didn't feel as cramped. The next thing I wanted to do was build the sugarcane farm above this and go with almost the exact same design. So I went through the process again, dropped the TNT, cleared the rest of the blocks, collected some more building materials, built up the wall design, got the rails in place, connected all the redstone, and this time instead of grass, I filled in the bottom with red sand to place the sugarcane onto with stairs that would hold the water, allowing the sugarcane to be planted. Then I used the leaves to hide the water, and this also meant that the flying machine would not get stuck to the blocks, since slime blocks that are used in the design cannot connect to leaves. I made sure to put some lighting in just so I wouldn't have any mobs spawning in the farm. I used the exact same flying machine to break the sugarcane blocks as well, and it seemed to be working. Then I had to cover the roof again and put the final finishing touches with the end rods, and now I had a working sugarcane farm above and a bamboo farm below. I also had to make sure to have a collection system with some chests to put the sugarcane into. So I cleared some space and then used the water stream to direct the sugarcane into the collection chest and made some final changes to the redstone so that it would all be working correctly. And now both farms should be working as intended and collecting both items. See, I could have stopped here, but I don't really do small scale projects, so it's time to double it and do everything I just did, but on the other side. And finally, by day 5800, I was pretty much done with the bamboo and sugarcane farm decoration, and this could now be checked off as complete. I traded for a little bit more redstone and glowstone to then add some decoration to blend the farm from the outside into the wall. You can also see the sugarcane farm was working as intended, filling up all of the chests. For the blending of the wall, I did the same design that was around the circle and it fit perfectly. The thing I wanted to fill the next space on the wall was going to be a kelp farm. For this, I wanted it to be one of the largest kelp farms anyone's ever seen and make it so that I'll never have to collect kelp again. I started out by clearing some space in the deep sea and putting down a beacon so that I would get the insta-mine effect. After a few days of clearing out some space, I now had enough area so I could drop down some TNT and make use of my creep farm. First, I traded for some redstone, then grabbed a few shulker boxes of sand to make the TNT necessary. To clear this, I was going to use the trusty TNT grid, so I started by spacing out the dispensers to drop the TNT, then made a bit more TNT to fill up each one, as there was a bit more space than I expected. And then hooking up all the redstone above to make sure the TNT would drop at the exact same time. Now it was time to blast through the entire section and get it cleared. Learning from previous problems with the machine, this time I did it slower so I could save diamonds as I go, and also clear any water so that the machine continues to do damage. After letting the machine run all the way to the bottom, I then spent the next few days clearing the remaining deep state. And now I had all this space to use and fill up with a large kelp farm. The way I wanted this farm to work was by having the fly machine go side to side to cut any kelp that grows, in the exact same style as the sugarcane and bamboo farm, except this time it would be underwater. I started by marking out where I'd have the fly machine start, and then continued to build the rest of the farm around this, so that I knew the water wouldn't spill out and ruin the redstone. I was using the kelp to make sure the whole tank was filled with water all the way to the top. I did a mini test before making the entire length of the farm, and it actually worked first try. The only thing I noticed was the soul sand was pointless, because the water source was broken by the flying machine, so the bubbles would cause the kelp to get stuck. This was an easy fix, I just had to swap out the flooring. Since I now knew the farm worked, I needed to make it up to max height. So I started to bring all the walls up until a cat from the creeper farm somehow got killed by lightning again. I quickly bred 2 of the other cats and replaced the old one. Listen, I can't be blamed for that, that's not my fault. And while I was out of the underground, I also spent some time to gather some more building materials, then continued on building up the rest of the tank and making the same design on the other side. I tried a few different styles, and this one I settled on I felt was a good fit for the room. Once I had the bottom section all done, I then wanted to do another section on top with more kelp, which would then have all the water flow to the same place and store everything. After almost being able to complete the top section as well, another material break was needed, so I grabbed some bone meal and headed back off to the tree farm. I then went and grabbed some gravel from the bartering farm, so that I had something to do while waiting for the drops at the guardian farm. The next few days were then spent marking out future building zone for the area. And once I had enough materials, I headed back towards the kelp farm. With the top 2 kelp tanks marked out, I can now quickly do a roof design, and then filled up each side with water to complete the top section as well. Next, I placed in the kelp, and after having a little trouble with the fly machines, I got it all fixed and started to make sure all the water flowed correctly into the collection area. I made sure to do this for both sides, and now all that was left to do was work on how the kelp was going to be stored. I made some shulker loaders where it would allow the kelp to flow in, and once the shulker box was full, it would then dispense another one. This design is by Borcon and works perfectly. Again, all the redstone designs I use will be down in the description. The next step after this was to make sure the only items allowed in would be kelp, just in case some fish got into the system. For this, I used a simple item sorter and had the water loop round to give it time to sort and collect all the kelp. The problem with this is the farm made so much kelp that the items were despawning. So anyone with any redstone knowledge, look away for this part, because I did some scuffed redstone to try and make sure the items didn't despawn. What I did was have hoppers pick up the items and then get dropped again from a dropper to reset the timer. In hindsight, I should have used dolphins because they can pick up any item and it will stop it from despawning. But with that done, the collection was ready and the kelp farm was now complete. Next, I blended in the farm with the wool, tying it nicely together. Now it was time to fill in the final side, and by luck this direction led to the end portal. So my idea for this section was that I would make a massive tunnel I could fly down to get straight into the end dimension. I spent the first few days clearing some space and planning where the tunnel would go. I then used gravel to clear some of the lava in the way because I wanted the tunnel to be sunken below the outside lava. And I quickly realized, why am I using gravel when I literally just made a bamboo farm and have unlimited scaffolding, which is so much easier to clear with. So clearing the lava in no time, I still had a lot of mining to do. I cleared until the thick wall of deep sea at the end, and then spent a bit of time thinking of how I wanted the tunnel to look by placing in some waterwood. Until suddenly, out of nowhere, my hardcore world almost came to an end. A creeper dropped down from the roof and exploded. If I was wearing my elytra, there's no way I would have survived this. So this is a simple reminder to always check you're wearing a chest plate when not flying. After this little jump scare, I then spent the next few days collecting some materials to make the tunnel look great. I even spent some time grabbing some lava from the nether so that I could replace the lava sources that water had turned into obsidian. Next, I planned out how the floor of the tunnel will fit into the design until I quickly hit the deep sea wall at the end again. And I decided this time it was time to get some beacons down so I could clear this quickly. So first I grabbed some wither skulls and then went and killed loads of withers to make into beacons. I ended up killing 64 withers so that I wouldn't run out of beacons for a long long while. I wanted to hide the beacons either side of the tunnel under the lava so that I could still get the effects going all the way down the tunnel. I cleared the lava so I could fully submerge the beacon, and then I had to spend more time in the nether getting some buckets so I could fill it back in to hide everything. Now I had the beacons, I could also use the haste effect to mine the deep state a lot faster. So I spent a lot of days just clearing out the next section. I spent so many days, I was almost at 6,000. For the last few days, I just continued building the outline of where the tunnel was going to be, and then filled in the walls with purple glass to connect the top and bottom section for now. For this tunnel design, I also wanted to go with an end theme since it was heading towards the end portal. So I grabbed some blocks from the end and started placing some endstone walls into the tunnel to see if it would fit the palette. Although it looked really weird, I felt like it somewhat worked. But just like that, I had completed 6,000 days in hardcore Minecraft without using a totem. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for the next one. Stay safe, stay wicked, stay bussin'. Peace. Although the mining takes up a lot of these 1,000 days, I managed to get a lot of things done. The sugarcane farm, the bamboo farm, the kelp farm, and of course, almost completed with the creeper farm.